When most people think of samurai, they picture stoic warriors in gleaming armor, performing precise sword strikes under cherry blossom trees, often accompanied by a whispering wind and dramatic music in a film. But real history is far more gritty, complex, and fascinating. The samurai were not born from myth. They evolved from a combination of social necessity, political maneuvering, and centuries of warfare in Japan's feudal landscape. The word samurai itself comes from the Japanese verb saburao, meaning to serve. Originally, these men were retainers, skilled warriors, employed by aristocratic families to protect land, enforce authority, and fight in conflicts. Unlike the Hollywood portrayal of lone wandering swordsmen, samurai were part of a rigid social hierarchy and bound by obligations that extended far beyond the battlefield. Their primary function was to serve their lord, known as a daimyo, and uphold the honor and stability of their clan. The origins of the samurai can be traced back to the late Heian period 7,940–1185, when central authority weakened and local landowners needed professional warriors to defend territories. Samurai emerged from provincial families who proved adept in mounted archery, swordsmanship, and strategy. Initially, they were not a unified class, they were localized fighters whose reputation and skill allowed them to rise in social status. Over time, these regional warriors coalesced into a distinct elite group with customs, rituals, and codes that set them apart from peasants, merchants, and even other soldiers. Training was rigorous from a young age. Boys destined to become samurai began martial instruction as children, learning sword techniques, archery, horseback riding, and strategy. But they also studied literature, poetry, calligraphy, and philosophy. This dual focus on martial skill and intellectual cultivation gave rise to the ideal of the bushi warrior, who was both deadly on the battlefield and cultured off it. In other words, the samurai were expected to be as sharp with a brush as with a blade, blending artistry with lethal precision. The evolution of weapons and tactics shaped samurai identity. Early samurai were primarily archers on horseback, using the longbow yumi to dominate the battlefield from a distance. The introduction of the curved katana transformed close quarters combat, emphasizing precision, speed, and lethal efficiency. Armor evolved accordingly. Layered plates, lacquered leather, and intricate helmets provided mobility and protection while reflecting status and family identity. Every aspect of a samurai's gear carried symbolic weight, representing skill, loyalty, and the aesthetics of power. The social structure surrounding samurai was also essential. They were part of the warrior caste, distinct from peasants, artisans, and merchants. Their privileges included stipends, land rights, and political influence. But these benefits came with obligations, absolute loyalty, rigorous discipline, and readiness for death. Samurai were not free agents. Their lives were intertwined with the fortunes of their lord and clan, creating a culture where honor, duty, and reputation outweighed personal desires. Religion and philosophy shaped the samurai mindset. Buddhism, Shintoism, and Confucian principles influenced ethics, conduct, and worldview. Zen Buddhism, in particular, emphasized mindfulness, discipline, and the acceptance of mortality, which became deeply intertwined with martial training. Samurai learned to confront death calmly, viewing it as a natural extension of life and service. This philosophical foundation made them not just fighters, but practitioners of a spiritual discipline, where mastery of mind and body was inseparable. Early conflicts, such as the Genpei War 118–01185, solidified the samurai's role in Japanese society. Regional clans, including the Minamoto and Taira, relied on skilled warriors to claim dominance. Victories in these wars enhanced the status of samurai families and institutionalized their importance in governance and military affairs. These conflicts also fostered a culture of strategy, intelligence gathering, and political maneuvering. Samurai were expected not only to fight, but also to advise, negotiate, and navigate the complexities of feudal power. The transformation from provincial warriors to elite class culminated with the establishment of the Kamakura shogunate 1185-1333. Japan's first military government. Samurai were no longer just local enforcers, they became the backbone of national administration and military authority. Their loyalty to the shogun and daimyo defined political stability, and their martial and ethical codes became deeply embedded in Japanese culture. The ideals of honor, discipline, and service that characterized the samurai legacy were codified and celebrated. Yet, samurai life was not glamorous. Despite the romantic imagery of tea ceremonies, poetry, and serene landscapes, the reality was often brutal. Samurai faced constant risk of death in battles, sieges, and skirmishes. They endured harsh training, strict discipline, and a societal expectation to maintain honor above all else. Failure in combat, disloyalty, or dishonor could result in severe punishment, including ritual suicide, seppuku, exile, or loss of status. The life of a samurai was a precarious balance between survival, service, and social expectation. Cultural narratives surrounding samurai often exaggerate or mythologize their deeds. Stories of invincible warriors, perfect swordsmen, and noble heroes are appealing but sometimes misleading. Historical records reveal complexity. Samurai were human, capable of mistakes, political intrigue, and moral ambiguity. Yet, the myths endure because they capture essential truths: courage, skill, discipline, and the relentless pursuit of excellence under immense pressure. These qualities resonate across cultures and time, contributing to the samurai's lasting appeal. Finally, the samurai's origins illustrate the fusion of necessity, skill, and ideology. From local retainers to elite warriors, they evolved through centuries of warfare, social change, and philosophical influence. Their identity encompassed martial prowess, intellectual cultivation, and ethical discipline, making them uniquely formidable and culturally significant. Understanding these roots allows us to appreciate the samurai not as mythical icons, but as real people navigating complex social, political, and martial landscapes. In essence, the samurai were born from necessity, but elevated through culture. They exemplified the tension between duty and personal identity, violence and discipline, survival and honor. From their earliest origins to their codification under the shogunate, they created a legacy that continues to captivate the imagination, bridging historical reality with mythical lore. They were not just warriors, they were architects of a social order, exemplars of skill and ethics, and enduring symbols of human resilience and ambition. When you hear the word Bushido, images of stoic samurai kneeling in a meditative posture, sword in hand, might come to mind. But Bushido, literally the way of the warrior, was far more than an aesthetic ideal. It was a living code that shaped the daily lives, decisions, and very identities of samurai. Understanding Bushido is essential to understanding just what samurai did on the battlefield, but why they lived, fought, and sometimes died the way they did. At its core, Bushido was a moral and ethical framework. It combined elements from Confucianism, Zen Buddhism, Shintoism, and practical warrior needs. Loyalty, honor, courage, and self-discipline were not abstract virtues. They were actionable principles guiding behavior in every facet of life. A samurai could not claim to be honorable merely by winning a battle or serving a lord. Every choice, action, and even thought was measured against the tenets of Bushido. One of the central tenets was loyalty key. Samurai were expected to serve their daimyo, or shogun, with absolute fidelity, even at the cost of their own life. Loyalty was not just contractual, it was a moral imperative that defined identity. A samurai who betrayed his lord was not only politically punished but socially condemned, often beyond redemption. Loyalty extended beyond the battlefield to administration, counsel, and personal conduct. Every interaction could either uphold or damage a samurai's honor. Honor Meiyo was another pillar of Bushido. Honor was intangible yet measurable in action. Reputation, courage in battle, adherence to the code, and skill in martial arts all contributed to a samurai's honor. A blemish on honor could follow a warrior for life. Ritual suicide, or seppuku, became a means to restore honor when all other options failed, demonstrating the extremity to which samurai were willing to go to preserve integrity. Unlike modern notions of reputation, honor in Bushido was inseparable from life and death. It was existential, absolute, and non-negotiable. Courage was not mere bravado. It was the disciplined ability to confront danger with awareness, control, and purpose. Samurai were trained from childhood to face lethal situations with composure. Zen meditation practices helped cultivate mindfulness, reducing hesitation in battle and enhancing focus. Courage also encompassed moral bravery, speaking truth to superiors, defending the weak, and making difficult decisions consistent with ethical principles. It was the balance of intellect, spirit, and physical skill under extreme pressure. Benevolence Jin, often overlooked in popular culture, reflected the samurai's responsibility to society. Samurai were not ruthless killers. By default, they were expected to protect those under their lord's care, administer justice, and exercise mercy when appropriate. Benevolence was a recognition of power's responsibility, emphasizing the moral dimension of martial skill. This ethic differentiated a true samurai from a mere mercenary, embedding societal obligation into martial life. Discipline Rei, both personal and social, structured every aspect of samurai existence. Training routines were rigorous, spanning swordsmanship, archery, horseback riding, and tactical maneuvers. Daily life involved meditation, study of poetry and literature, and rituals reinforcing focus and etiquette. Discipline was internalized, forming habits and reflexes that could be relied upon in the chaos of battle. A disciplined samurai could act decisively and efficiently under extreme stress, embodying the philosophy that mastery of self was as important as mastery of weapons. Bushido also emphasized honesty and integrity. Makoto, deception in battle was acceptable strategically, but personal conduct demanded transparency, truthfulness, and reliability. Promises were sacred. Breaking one could destroy reputation and social bonds. In a hierarchical society where relationships were formalized, integrity maintained trust and stability, both within the clan and across political alliances. Samurai understood that their word was an extension of their honor and personal identity. Another essential aspect was self-control. Jizei. Samurai were trained to regulate emotions, manage fear, and prevent impulsive action. Meditation, ritual, and philosophical study reinforced mental fortitude. Emotional mastery ensured that decisions in battle, governance, or personal life were deliberate and aligned with ethical and strategic principles. Self-control was not stoic suppression, but an active engagement of mind and spirit, allowing the warrior to act with precision, clarity, and purpose. Bushido was also deeply intertwined with death. Samurai accepted mortality as an inevitable reality. Meditation on death, contemplation of impermanence, and preparation for potential ritual suicide fostered courage, detachment, and focus. This philosophical embrace of mortality transformed fear into discipline. Where modern audiences might see a warrior's death as tragic, the samurai viewed it as an opportunity to demonstrate virtue, maintain honor, and fulfill duty. Ritual and symbolism reinforced Bushido daily. Bowing, etiquette in conversation, presentation of weapons, and even the proper handling of meals were governed by codes reflecting respect, hierarchy, and mindfulness. Each act was a reinforcement of discipline, training, and ethical awareness. Samurai lived in a constant state of performative integrity, where everyday actions mirrored martial and moral ideals. Bushido's influence extended beyond individual warriors to societal structures. Lords and retainers relied on the code to maintain order, cohesion, and legitimacy. Warfare, governance, and diplomacy were framed by expectations of honor, loyalty, and ethical conduct. Samurai families cultivated Bushido principles across generations, embedding the philosophy into education, rituals, and cultural memory. This codification allowed for continuity of values, even as political circumstances changed. Yet, like any ethical system, Bushido had tensions and contradictions. Absolute loyalty could conflict with moral judgment. Courage could lead to recklessness. Benevolence sometimes clashed with duty to lord or clan. The interpretation of Bushido varied by era, region, and individual. Despite these complexities, the overarching framework guided behavior, providing a lens through which samurai evaluated life, death, and action. Popular culture often simplifies Bushido, portraying samurai as emotionless, invincible swordsmen. Historical reality reveals a more nuanced picture. Individuals navigating ethical, social, and martial challenges, balancing personal virtue with societal obligation. The ideal of Bushido shaped character, social order, and the very perception of what it meant to be human in a violent and hierarchical world. In conclusion, Bushido was more than a set of rules. It was a living philosophy shaping mind, body, and society. It integrated loyalty, honor, courage, discipline, benevolence, and awareness of mortality into a coherent framework that defined the samurai way of life. Understanding Bushido allows us to see samurai not just as fighters, but as moral agents, cultural icons, and disciplined human beings navigating a complex world. It is this synthesis of ethics, skill, and mortality that makes the samurai enduringly fascinating, inspiring stories, films, and scholarship centuries later. When you picture a samurai, the cinematic image of a warrior wielding a katana in a climactic duel often comes to mind. But the reality of a samurai's life was far more complex, structured, and disciplined. Daily existence was a careful balance of martial training, intellectual cultivation, social duties, and ritualized conduct. To understand the samurai, one must step into their daily rhythms, from the crack of dawn to the quiet moments of reflection before sleep. From early childhood, training began. Boys destined for samurai life were introduced to weapons, horsemanship, and strategy, often under the supervision of family members or local instructors. Sword practice kenjutsu, archery kyujitsu, and spear techniques sojutsu were fundamental. Yet, unlike a casual workout, training was exhaustive, repetitive, and highly ritualized. Every movement, every stance, every strike had to be precise, practiced until it became second nature. This repetition was not just physical, it was moral and mental conditioning, teaching patience, focus, and the discipline necessary for life and death situations. Physical conditioning went beyond martial techniques. Samurai practiced rigorous exercises to build strength, agility, and endurance. Running, swimming, climbing, and even strategic games like Go were incorporated to develop strategic thinking and mental resilience. Meditation and breathing exercises, often rooted in Zen Buddhism, were equally important, training the mind to remain calm under pressure. The samurai understood that true skill arose from harmony between body and mind. Armor and weaponry were extensions of training. Samurai became intimately familiar with every piece of their gear. Katana, wakizashi, yori spear, yumi bow, and protective armor were not just tools, they were part of identity. Learning to wear armor efficiently, move gracefully despite its weight, and handle multiple weapons in varied scenarios was a daily practice. Weapon care was ritualized. Sharpening blades, polishing armor, and arranging gear were acts of discipline and respect, reinforcing connection between warrior and tools. Daily life was regimented around duties, study, and social etiquette. Samurai observed strict schedules, often beginning before sunrise with physical exercise or meditation. Meals were simple, nutritious, and consumed with mindfulness. Education encompassed calligraphy, poetry, literature, and history skills believed to cultivate intellect, character, and moral understanding. Social rituals, including etiquette in greeting, bowing, and speaking, were practiced daily to maintain hierarchy, respect, and social cohesion. Even mundane acts became exercises in discipline and reflection. Service to the Lord Daimyo was a central aspect of daily life. Samurai carried out administrative duties, patrolled lands, trained subordinate warriors, and prepared for military campaigns. Loyalty was enacted not only in combat, but in the small, constant obligations that demonstrated fidelity and reliability. Errands, counsel, and representation of the Lord required awareness, tact, and the ability to act in accordance with Bushido. Every action, even outside the battlefield, was a measure of a samurai's honor and competence. Rituals and ceremonies punctuated daily routines. Tea ceremonies, shrine visits, seasonal festivals, and ancestral rites were integrated into life, reflecting spiritual and cultural values. Participation reinforced mindfulness, respect for tradition, and continuity with the past. Samurai were not only warriors, but custodians of culture, blending martial life with aesthetic and spiritual practice. These rituals provided mental grounding and structure, ensuring that even in times of conflict, the samurai remained connected to ethical and cultural frameworks. Sparring and mock combat were central to training. Samurai engaged in structured duels to refine technique, timing, and reflexes. These controlled encounters simulated battlefield scenarios, allowing practice of strategy, observation, and adaptability. Sparring was as much mental as physical. Anticipation, deception, and psychological resilience were trained alongside strikes and parries. Success depended on composure, precision, and strategic thinking, mirroring the pressures of real combat without immediate mortal risk. Seasonal military campaigns further defined experience. In times of conflict, samurai traveled with their lord's forces, participating in sieges, battles, and tactical operations. Life on campaign was harsh. Long marches, unpredictable terrain, limited supplies, and constant readiness. Camp discipline, logistical coordination, and battlefield awareness became part of daily survival. These experiences honed resilience, teamwork, and tactical ingenuity. reinforcing lessons learned during peacetime training. Social interactions within the samurai class were governed by hierarchy and mutual obligation. Younger samurai observed elders, learning through imitation and guidance. Senior warriors mentored juniors, transmitting skills, values, and tactical wisdom. Relationships within the class reinforced cohesion, loyalty, and ethical conduct. Collaboration and competition coexisted, as reputation depended on both personal skill and contribution to the clan's success. Mental and spiritual training complemented physical routines. Meditation, contemplation of mortality, and philosophical study prepared samurai for the psychological demands of combat and leadership. Awareness of impermanence, cultivated through Zen and ethical reflection, mitigated fear, enhanced focus, and fostered acceptance of life's uncertainties. Mental resilience allowed samurai to act decisively under extreme stress, turning potential panic into disciplined response. Despite the regimented life, moments of leisure and reflection existed. Poetry, painting, music, and tea allowed expression of creativity, intellectual engagement, and emotional balance. These practices were not mere hobbies, they reinforced discipline, aesthetic sensibility, and cultural literacy. Samurai were expected to be complete individuals, warriors, scholars, and cultured participants in society. The balance between martial rigor and cultural cultivation defined the ideal. Health, diet, and self-care were integral. Simple meals, herbal remedies, and physical maintenance ensured readiness for battle and daily duties. Attention to posture, movement, and flexibility reduced injuries, enhancing longevity and effectiveness. Samurai approached the body as a tool requiring care, discipline, and understanding, reflecting the integration of physical, mental, and spiritual training. The home environment mirrored societal and ethical values. Samurai households maintained order, ritual observance, and social decorum. Family members often contributed to education, cultural training, and preparation for societal roles. Household life reinforced discipline, loyalty, and the broader obligations of the class, ensuring that training extended beyond the battlefield into every facet of existence. Finally, the rhythm of samurai life instilled a sense of purpose and identity. Each day, from training to service, study to ritual, reinforced the principles of Bushido, shaping character, resilience, and societal function. Life was not a series of isolated events, it was a continuous practice of skill, ethics, and loyalty. Through this disciplined structure, samurai achieved mastery, not only of weapons, but of self, creating a legacy that continues to captivate the imagination. In conclusion, the daily life of a samurai was a carefully orchestrated blend of training, service, and cultural practice. Physical conditioning, martial skill, intellectual development, spiritual cultivation, and social duty intertwined to produce warriors capable of extraordinary feats. Discipline, mindfulness, and ethical conduct governed every action, ensuring that even in times of peace, the samurai remained ready for war and exemplary in virtue. Understanding this daily regimen reveals the reality behind the mythic image. Samurai were not just fighters, they were disciplined, cultured, and ethically grounded individuals, whose life was a continuous exercise in mastery of mind, body, and spirit. When most people think of samurai, their minds immediately jump to the iconic katana, a curved, gleaming sword that slices through enemies with precision. Yet, to understand the samurai, one must look beyond Hollywood's cinematic sword fights. Samurai warfare was an intricate combination of weapon mastery, strategic thinking, armor design, and tactical innovation. Their arsenal and approach to combat reflected centuries of refinement, adaptation to terrain, and philosophical principles grounded in Bushido. The katana is arguably the most famous symbol of the samurai. Its elegant curve, sharp edge, and precise balance were the results of meticulous craftsmanship. But the katana was not the only weapon in a samurai's repertoire. The wakizashi, a shorter companion sword, allowed for close quarters combat and ritual acts, including seppuku. The yori spear extended reach and allowed samurai to fight effectively in formations. The noginata, a curved polem, was especially favored by women samurai and mounted warriors for its versatility. Each weapon had a purpose, and mastery required years of disciplined training. Archery was equally vital. Samurai were originally mounted archers, and the yumi, a long asymmetrical bow, was central to warfare. Unlike European bows, the yumi's design allowed for use on horseback, enabling samurai to engage enemies from a distance while maintaining mobility. Archery required strength, precision, and calm focus, a perfect blend of physical and mental discipline. Archery contests were not only practical, they were also cultural and ceremonial, reflecting status, skill, and aesthetic sensibility. Armor was both functional and symbolic. Samurai armor evolved over centuries, balancing protection with mobility. Early armor, made of leather and iron plates, gave way to lamellar constructions with overlapping scales, lacquered to resist weather and damage. Helmets kabuto, wolf and ornate, signaling rank, clan affiliation, and intimidating opponents. Armor was a statement of identity. As much as protection, each samurai's appearance conveyed social standing, loyalty, and battlefield role. Proper care of armor was part of discipline, reflecting the intimate connection between warrior and equipment. Mounted combat was a cornerstone of samurai warfare. Horses were trained for battlefield conditions, responding to commands under stress. Cavalry charges, combined with archery and sword strikes, allowed samurai to exploit speed, height, and maneuverability. Coordination between horse and rider demanded rigorous training, reflexes, and psychological resilience. The mounted samurai could engage multiple enemies, retreat strategically, or dominate open-field battles, demonstrating the fusion of skill, tactics, and mobility. Battlefield tactics extended beyond individual skill. Samurai engaged in organized formations, flanking maneuvers, ambushes, and strategic retreats. Knowledge of terrain, weather, and enemy behavior was crucial. Commanders relied on scouts, intelligence, and signaling systems to coordinate units. Victory often depended not just on physical prowess, but on preparation, observation, and the ability to adapt quickly. Samurai training instilled both individual initiative and loyalty to broader strategic objectives. Siege warfare demanded specialized tactics and weapons. Castles and fortifications were common in feudal Japan, requiring methods to breach walls, gates, and moats. Samurai employed ladders, scaling hooks, and coordinated attacks to overcome defenses. Strategic patience, psychological pressure, and negotiation often complemented direct assaults. Success required understanding both human behavior and mechanical advantage, reflecting a sophisticated approach to warfare beyond mere swordsmanship. Naval engagements, though less common, were also part of samurai military activity, especially in coastal domains. Boarding actions, small boat combat, and coastal defense demanded adaptability, improvisation, and teamwork. Archery and spears were employed alongside specialized tactics for limited space and unstable footing. These scenarios emphasized the samurai's versatility, extending training from land to water and adapting techniques to varied environments. Tactics were closely intertwined with psychology and morale. Samurai understood the importance of intimidation, deception, and ritual display. Banner design, helmet ornamentation, and war cries were not superficial. They communicated strength, coordination, and confidence to both allies and enemies. Psychological mastery was part of Bushido. A composed, disciplined warrior could unsettle opponents, create hesitation, and influence the flow of battle. Victory often depended as much on mental manipulation as physical skill. Weapon maintenance and readiness were integral. Blades were meticulously sharpened, bows inspected, and armor polished daily. Neglect was not only dangerous, but dishonorable. Samurai viewed their equipment as extensions of themselves. The sword in particular was considered the soul of the warrior. Care and respect for weapons reinforced discipline, mindfulness, and ethical responsibility. Improper maintenance could mean death in combat, making attention to detail a matter of survival. Samurai strategy also reflected adaptation to opponents and changing technology. Firearms introduced by Europeans in the 16th century prompted tactical innovation. Samurai incorporated matchlock guns, Tonegashima, developed volley formations, and adapted armor designs to mitigate the new threat. Far from being rigid traditionalists, samurai were pragmatic and flexible, merging innovation with tradition to maintain battlefield effectiveness. Training emphasized integration of multiple weapons and techniques. Samurai learned to transition seamlessly between katana, yori, naginata, and yumi, adjusting to distance, opponent type, and tactical needs. Combined arms approaches, teamwork, and situational awareness were essential. Sparring and mock battles simulated real conditions, teaching judgment, timing, and psychological composure under pressure. Mastery of multiple modalities was crucial for survival and effectiveness in the unpredictable chaos of combat. The combination of ritual, training, and real-world application forged samurai into highly effective warriors. Discipline, ethics, and technique converged, making them more than soldiers. They were embodiments of cultural ideals. Battle tactics were inseparable from philosophy, social hierarchy, and individual skill, reflecting a system in which morality, strategy, and martial ability were deeply interconnected. Beyond battlefield utility, weapons and armor held ceremonial and symbolic significance. Presentation of a sword, polishing routines, and arrangement of equipment were acts of reverence, reflecting identity, status, and spiritual discipline. Combat was not purely mechanical, it was also a ritualized enactment of values, ethics, and cultural continuity. Samurai fought not only to win, but to demonstrate virtue, loyalty, and mastery. In conclusion, the samurai's mastery of weapons, armor, and tactics was the product of centuries of refinement, practical necessity, and philosophical discipline. Each weapon was trained with precision, each maneuver studied, and each piece of equipment maintained with care. Tactics were informed by observation, strategy, and psychology, creating warriors capable of both individual brilliance and coordinated action. Understanding the martial reality behind the katana and armor reveals the depth, sophistication, and enduring fascination of the samurai as both historical figures and cultural icons. Far beyond the movies and myths, samurai were disciplined, versatile, and strategic warriors whose legacy continues to shape imagination, culture, and ethical reflection today. When we imagine samurai, the mind often conjures lone warriors or elite men in armor, yet the reality of samurai society was far more complex, with defined social roles, that extended well beyond the battlefield. Understanding these roles, including the lives of women, ronin, and other members of the samurai class, provides a fuller picture of their culture, ethics, and daily life. Women in samurai society were far from passive spectators. Though barred from most frontline combat, women were expected to uphold the family's honor, manage households, and sometimes defend their homes during conflict. The Onabugeisha, female warriors from elite families, were trained in martial arts, swordsmanship, and naginata techniques. Historical records highlight women defending castles, leading resistance during sieges, and instructing younger generations in ethical and martial discipline. Their role was both practical and symbolic. They embodied loyalty, courage, and the extension of Bushido principles into domestic life. Training for women paralleled men's in some ways, but was adapted to their expected responsibilities. Emphasis was placed on agility, strategic defense, and the protection of family and property. Women practiced spear and sword techniques, archery, and sometimes battlefield tactics to supplement men's defense. The philosophy of Bushido was not exclusive to men. Women were inculcated with discipline, ethical judgment, and the acceptance of responsibility, ensuring that the household was a microcosm of the larger samurai ethical system. Marriage and family life were intertwined with social obligation. Women arranged domestic routines, oversaw servants, and ensured proper conduct in daily rituals. They were educators, moral guides, and cultural custodians, teaching literacy, poetry, etiquette, and religion to children. The ideal samurai household relied on a balance: men trained and served on battlefields or in administration, while women maintained stability, culture, and continuity of family honor. Together, they created a disciplined, ethically grounded social unit. Moving beyond family, the Ronin masterless samurai represents another critical aspect of samurai society. Ronin were samurai who had lost their lord through death, political upheaval, or dismissal. Stripped of official duties, stipends, and often social status, Ronin occupied a liminal space, skilled warriors without a legitimate channel for service. Their lives could be precarious, ranging from wandering mercenaries to teachers of martial arts, or even criminals. Despite their outsider status, Ronin retained training, discipline, and honor codes, navigating society in complex and sometimes morally ambiguous ways. The phenomenon of the Ronin illustrates the tension between social structure and individual skill. While Bushido emphasized loyalty to a lord, the Ronin embodied resilience in the absence of hierarchy. Some became legends, undertaking personal quests, defending villages, or engaging in duels to restore honor. Others struggled, reflecting the societal consequences of rigid hierarchical obligations. Ronin stories reveal the adaptability, moral struggle, and personal agency of samurai culture when stripped of institutional support. Social roles also encompassed administrative and governance duties. Samurai were not only warriors, but bureaucrats, advisors, and enforcers of law. They collected taxes, managed land, oversaw justice, and maintained order within their domains. These roles required literacy, ethical judgment, and social acumen. The martial training that prepared them for battle was complemented by intellectual and administrative skills, creating a class capable of wielding power, both physically and politically. Community roles were equally significant. Samurai were expected to participate in rituals, religious observances, and public ceremonies. Festivals, shrine maintenance, and cultural events reinforced the social fabric. Ethical norms and political loyalty, public conduct mattered, A samurai's behavior in the community reflected not only personal honor, but also the prestige of his family and lord. Social performance, therefore, was a constant extension of martial and ethical training. Education extended beyond men and women to children. Boys were trained in martial arts, strategy, and philosophy, while girls learned household management, etiquette, literacy, and sometimes self-defense. These educational structures ensured continuity of skills, ethics, and social stability across generations. The upbringing of children was both practical and symbolic, embedding Bushido values and societal expectations from a young age. Samurai were also responsible for religious and spiritual duties. Shinto and Buddhist practices permeated daily life, guiding moral decisions, ceremonial conduct, and mental discipline. Rituals such as prayers before battle, ancestral offerings, and seasonal observances reinforce the connection between ethical action, family, and divine favor. Spiritual practice provided mental clarity, ethical grounding, and resilience, complementing martial and administrative duties. The contrast between samurai in service and ronin highlights the fragility and adaptability of social roles. A samurai's identity was intertwined with obligation, loyalty, duty, and honor-structured life. A ronin, by contrast, navigated ambiguity, seeking purpose outside the formal hierarchy. Their stories emphasize both the power and limitations of the social system, revealing the human dimension of a disciplined warrior class confronted with uncertainty and moral choice. Women's influence, though less visible in battle narratives, was equally impactful. They preserved family honor, trained future generations, and acted as ethical anchors within the household. On occasion, they demonstrated martial prowess, strategic intelligence, and leadership, challenging assumptions about gender roles in feudal Japan. The Onabu Geisha exemplifies how women could embody Bushido principles in lethal and practical ways, contributing to the defense and honor of the clan. The interplay of honor, duty, and flexibility defined all social roles. Whether warrior, ronin, or woman, individuals navigated expectations, ethical frameworks, and practical challenges. Success required balancing personal skill with societal obligation, ambition with loyalty, and courage with discipline. These dynamics created a complex, adaptive, and ethically rigorous social ecosystem that maintained cohesion, stability, and cultural identity. In essence, samurai society was more than a hierarchy of warriors. It was a network of interdependent roles, duties, and moral expectations. Women maintained honor and culture, ronin tested resilience and adaptation, and samurai in service balanced warfare, administration, and ritual. Each role reinforced the others, creating a society in which ethics, skill, and social responsibility were inseparable. Understanding these social structures reveals the depth, complexity, and humanity of samurai life, far beyond the spectacle of swordplay or battlefield heroics. Finally, the stories of women, ronin, and socially active samurai illuminate the humanity behind the armor. These narratives show that the samurai class was not just about combat, it was about ethics, responsibility, adaptation, and cultural continuity. By exploring these roles, we see how Bushido principles permeated every aspect of life, and how honor, loyalty, and resilience were cultivated across genders, generations, and circumstances. The samurai's society was as disciplined, dynamic, and nuanced as their legendary skills with sword and bow, creating a legacy that continues to inspire fascination today. The samurai did not exist in a vacuum of ceremony and discipline alone. Their lives were profoundly shaped by warfare. The history of samurai is inseparable from the history of Japanese battles, sieges, and strategic maneuvers that span centuries. To understand samurai, one must explore not just their individual skills, but the larger conflicts that define their era and the tactics that allowed them to dominate the battlefields of feudal Japan. Samurai warfare evolved in response to Japan's fragmented political landscape. During the late Heian period 79–1185, the central government weakened, leaving local aristocrats and provincial governors to assert control over their domains. This decentralization sparked regional conflicts that required professional warriors. Early samurai engaged in mounted archery, skirmishes, and small-scale raids, honing skills that combined mobility, precision, and strategic insight. These early battles were less about large armies clashing and more about maneuver, intelligence, and exploiting terrain. One of the most iconic early conflicts was the Genpei War 1180–1185, a civil war between the Minamoto and Taira clans. The war culminated in the decisive Battle of Dan no Ura, a naval engagement that demonstrated samurai adaptability. Warriors fought not only on land, but also aboard ships, using swords, spears, and bows while managing the instability of the sea. Strategic placement, knowledge of tides, and command coordination proved as crucial as martial skill. The Minamoto victory established the Kamakura as shogunate and solidified the samurai's role as both military and political power brokers. During the Kamakura 1185–1333 and Muromachi 1336–1573 periods, samurai warfare became increasingly organized. Armies were structured into units with designated roles: cavalry, archers, spear formations, and infantry. Siege warfare advanced, with fortifications, moats, and defensive works requiring careful planning. Samurai adapted techniques for both offense and defense, emphasizing discipline, communication, and coordination. Campaigns were meticulously planned, with attention to logistics, morale, and strategic advantage, reflecting the combination of practical knowledge and philosophical discipline in Bushido. The Sengoku period 1467–1603 marked the height of samurai warfare. Known as the Warring States era, it was a time of near-constant conflict, regional power struggles, and innovation. Daimyo raised armies of samurai and foot soldiers ashigaru, employing tactics ranging from rapid cavalry raids to coordinated multi-pronged assaults. Famous battles, such as Okayazama 1560, showcased the power of strategic surprise. Oda Nobunaga, vastly outnumbered, used terrain, timing, and deception to achieve victory, demonstrating that samurai tactics extended far beyond personal combat. They required intelligence, adaptability, and psychological insight. The Battle of Nagashino, 1575, exemplifies tactical evolution. Nobunaga deployed massed arquebusiers to Nagashima behind protective palisades, combining firearms with traditional samurai weaponry. Cavalry charges by the Takeda clan were repelled with coordinated volley fire, marking a turning point in the integration of firearms into samurai warfare. This battle illustrates the samurai's pragmatism. While rooted in tradition and Bushido, they adapted swiftly to technological change, blending strategy, firepower, and morale to achieve decisive outcomes. Siege warfare remained critical. Castles were designed not only as residences, but as defensive hubs. Samurai engineers developed complex gates, walls, and moats, while attackers crafted ladders, siege towers, and sapping techniques. Siege engagements tested patience, ingenuity, and endurance. Samurai commanders often used psychological tactics, displaying the bodies of enemies, feigned retreats, or negotiating for surrender to minimize losses. Victory was as much about planning, morale, and perception as it was about brute force. Tactics on the battlefield were multifaceted. Samurai employed flanking maneuvers, ambushes, and feigned retreats to destabilize opponents. Coordinated attacks combined archers, spearmen, and cavalry, creating dynamic engagements that rewarded strategy and disciplined execution. Terrain was exploited extensively. Hills, rivers, forests, and narrow passes were used to channel enemies, conceal movements, and maximize advantage. Samurai were trained to assess the environment, anticipate enemy behavior, and act decisively, a combination of situational awareness, experience, and mental resilience. Individual skill remained essential. A samurai's ability with a sword, spear, bow, or firearm could turn the tide of skirmishes or duels. Mastery of weapons, combined with discipline, observation, and timing, allowed warriors to exploit weaknesses, respond to threats, and inspire allies. Leadership often rested on example. A samurai demonstrating courage and skill could rally troops, maintain morale, and influence outcomes beyond personal combat. Naval engagements, though less frequent than land battles, were strategically important. Coastal conflicts required boarding actions, ship-to-ship combat, and management of unpredictable conditions. Samurai adapted traditional weapons and tactics to maritime environments, emphasizing balance, coordination, and improvisation. These operations highlight the versatility and adaptability of samurai training, extending martial application across land and water. Communication and signaling were vital. Flags, drums, and horns conveyed orders across noisy and chaotic battlefields. Commanders relied on scouts and messengers to relay information about enemy movements, terrain, and logistical needs. Coordination between units ensured that tactics were executed precisely, while individual initiative allowed flexibility in unforeseen situations. Samurai understood that discipline and communication could compensate for numerical disadvantage. Psychology played a crucial role. Samurai used intimidation, display, and morale management to influence outcomes. Armor ornamentation, banner design, war cries, and ritualized movements created an aura of fearlessness and cohesion. Psychological mastery was embedded in Bushido, as maintaining composure, projecting confidence, and exploiting enemy hesitation often determined success. Warfare was as much a contest of mind as of body. Training in mock battles, duels, and war games prepared samurai for real engagements. These exercises simulated conditions of combat, teaching judgment, timing, teamwork, and adaptability. Samurai learned to respond to unpredictable scenarios, manage stress, and execute strategy under pressure. Repetition, reflection, and mentorship ensured that lessons were internalized and could be applied in life and death situations. Despite preparation, casualties were common. Samurai accepted mortality as integral to service, viewing death in battle as an opportunity to demonstrate honor. The awareness of danger heightened focus, reinforced ethical decision-making, and strengthened commitment to duty. Battles were not just contests of skill, they were tests of character, courage, and adherence to the moral code of Bushido. Political consequences were intertwined with warfare. Victory or defeat affected clan status, territorial control, and social hierarchy. Samurai navigated not only tactical challenges, but political ramifications, balancing loyalty, ambition, and strategy. Success required integrating personal skill with understanding of broader social and political contexts, demonstrating that samurai warfare extended beyond mere combat into governance, diplomacy, and ethical responsibility. In conclusion, samurai warfare was a complex interplay of strategy, tactics, individual skill, psychological mastery, and social responsibility. Famous battles illustrate adaptability, innovation, and disciplined execution, while daily preparation reinforced ethical principles, situational awareness, and martial proficiency. From the Genpei War to the Sengoku period, samurai demonstrated that victory depended on intellect as much as muscle, planning as much as courage, and honor as much as efficiency. Understanding these conflicts reveals the reality behind the legendary image of the samurai, warriors who combine strategy, skill, and philosophy to navigate the violent and unpredictable world of feudal Japan. For centuries, the samurai thrived in a world defined by constant conflict, political intrigue, and personal valor. However, history is rarely static. By the early 17th century, Japan entered a period of unprecedented peace under the Tokugawa shogunate 1603-1868, marking the beginning of the Edo period. While this era brought stability and economic growth, it also fundamentally transformed the samurai class, challenging their traditional roles and forcing adaptation in ways that were both profound and paradoxical. The transition from warfare to peace had immediate implications. Samurai had built their identity on martial prowess, battlefield experience, and service to a lord. With the establishment of centralized Tokugawa rule, large-scale military campaigns became rare. Instead of leading armies into battle, samurai were increasingly tasked with bureaucratic duties, administrative oversight, and ceremonial responsibilities. The sword, once the symbol of power and skill, became a badge of status, while daily life shifted toward governance, etiquette, and social hierarchy. This shift created tension between identity and function. Samurai were trained warriors, bound by Bushido to uphold honor, courage, and loyalty. In a peaceful era, opportunities to demonstrate these virtues in combat were scarce. To reconcile tradition with reality, samurai culture emphasized ethical refinement, cultural sophistication, and moral guidance. Martial training continued, but its purpose evolved. It was now as much about discipline, self-control, and preparation for potential conflict as it was about practical battlefield application. The bureaucratic role of samurai expanded significantly. Administrators, tax collectors, magistrates, and diplomats now formed the backbone of governance. Samurai were responsible for enforcing laws, maintaining order in domains, and managing the affairs of peasants, artisans, and merchants. Mastery of martial skills was still respected, but competence in negotiation, record keeping, and protocol became equally critical. Samurai adapted to these duties with discipline and attention to hierarchy, demonstrating the flexibility of Bushido in non-military contexts. Economic challenges also influenced samurai life. Unlike peasants or merchants, samurai were often stipended rather than owning productive land. Their income depended on the favor of their lord or the shogunate, creating vulnerability in times of economic fluctuation. Some samurai struggled to maintain their households, relying on side businesses, loans, or frugal living. Despite these pressures, the ideal of honor discouraged overt commercial activity, leading to social tension and creative solutions for survival without compromising status. Cultural life flourished during the Edo period, and samurai became patrons and practitioners of the arts. Poetry, calligraphy, tea ceremonies, and no theatre became central to personal development and social prestige. Mastery of culture was not mere decoration, it reflected discipline, aesthetic sensitivity, and moral refinement. Just as combat training shaped mental and physical fortitude, artistic practice cultivated patience, focus, and ethical awareness, integrating the samurai ideal into everyday life. The role of women within samurai households also evolved. Samurai wives managed increasingly complex domestic operations, overseeing education, finance, and cultural rituals. The education of children emphasized literacy, ethics, and etiquette, ensuring that future generations retain the social and moral values essential to samurai identity. Women's contributions became central to maintaining family honor and continuity in an era when warfare was no longer the defining activity. The existence of Ronin persisted, but their circumstances shifted. Peace reduced demand for martial service, leaving many masterless warriors in precarious positions. Some found employment as teachers of martial arts, bodyguards, or administrators, while others struggled with poverty or turned to crime. Ronin became symbols of both romantic independence and social instability, reflecting the changing dynamics of a class historically rooted in service and combat. The psychological impact of this transformation was profound. Samurai had been trained to face death, wield power, and act decisively under pressure. In peace, these skills were underutilized, creating a sense of frustration, existential questioning, and adaptation. Philosophical reflection, study of Confucian and Zen texts, and moral mentorship became avenues to maintain purpose, internal discipline, and honor. Bushido, once validated through combat, now found expression in ethical governance, ritual observance, and cultural practice. Education and mentorship flourished during this period. Samurai schools Terakoya and domain academies Hank emphasized moral development, history, and strategy. Martial techniques were preserved for potential conflict, but intellectual and ethical training gained prominence. These institutions ensured continuity of samurai values across generations, embedding Bushido in scholarship, governance, and social conduct. Peace allowed refinement of the mind and spirit to match the refinement of martial skill. Even ceremonial warfare retained symbolic importance. Annual drills, archery competitions, and sparring exercises maintained martial readiness and reinforced social cohesion. Demonstrations of skill, strategy games, and public displays of etiquette provided opportunities to exhibit discipline, composure, and honor without bloodshed. These practices sustained the warrior ethos in a context where traditional battlefields were largely absent. The Edo peace era also created stratification within the samurai class. Senior officials and advisors enjoyed prestige, stipends, and influence, while lower-ranking samurai faced financial and social challenges. The disparity highlighted tensions between status, opportunity, and the ideals of Bushido. Navigating this hierarchy required intelligence, diplomacy, and ethical conduct, proving that leadership and honor were as essential in peacetime as in war. Religion and philosophy became increasingly central. Shinto rituals, Confucian ethics, and Zen meditation reinforced moral discipline, mindfulness, and acceptance of change. Samurai explored these teachings as a means of reconciling the warrior identity with a peaceful society. Reflection on mortality, duty, and ethical action provided continuity and purpose, allowing samurai to maintain coherence of identity despite diminished battlefield engagement. Despite challenges, the Edo period solidified the cultural and ethical legacy of the samurai. Their influence extended into governance, social stability, and the arts, Samurai codified values, maintained ethical standards, and modeled disciplined living for a broader society. Peace did not erase their identity, it reshaped it, emphasizing moral excellence, intellectual cultivation, and societal contribution alongside martial prowess. The decline of battlefield engagement also made samurai legends more mythic. Stories of courage, duels, and heroism were preserved in literature, theater, and oral history. These narratives reinforced cultural ideals, inspiring later generations and preserving a sense of continuity with a martial past. Myth and history intertwined, creating the enduring image of the samurai as both real and symbolic figures. In conclusion, the Edo peace era redefined the samurai, transitioning from warriors of constant battle to bureaucrats, cultural patrons, and ethical exemplars. They navigated profound changes with adaptability, discipline, and resilience. Their identity evolved, balancing martial tradition with administrative, social, and cultural responsibilities. The legacy of this transformation demonstrates the samurai's ability to maintain relevance, honor, and ethical integrity in a world no longer defined by war, preserving the principles of Bushido for centuries to come. The Edo period shows that true mastery lies not only in the art of war, but in the art of life itself. When most people picture samurai, images of swords, armor, and fierce battles dominate the imagination. Yet, the samurai were as much cultivators of culture as they were warriors. Beyond the clang of steel, the rustle of silk, and the careful brushstrokes of ink, samurai engaged deeply with art, literature, and philosophy, integrating these pursuits into the broader framework of Bushido. Understanding this cultural dimension illuminates the sophistication, ethics, and intellectual depth of a class often misunderstood as solely martial. The aesthetic training of the samurai was not mere indulgence, it was an extension of discipline. Activities such as calligraphy, poetry, painting, and tea-ceremony cultivated focus, patience, and refined taste. The precision required to execute a brushstroke mirrored the control needed in swordsmanship. The meticulous preparation of a tea ceremony, with attention to ritual, placement, and sequence, paralleled the structured movements and timing crucial in combat. In every artistic act, samurai practiced mindfulness, cultivating both character and skill. Literature and poetry held a central place in samurai education. Classical Chinese and Japanese texts, historical chronicles, and moral treatises were studied to impart wisdom, ethics, and strategic insight. Poetry, particularly waka and haiku, allowed samurai to express emotion, reflect on mortality, and appreciate the fleeting beauty of nature. Composition was disciplined adherence to structure, rhythm, and metaphor reflected a cultivated mind. In this way, literature became both personal meditation and social currency, demonstrating intellect, taste, and moral sensibility. Philosophical engagement was equally vital. Confucian ethics provided frameworks for loyalty, hierarchy, and social responsibility, reinforcing obligations to lord, family, and society. Zen Buddhism taught mindfulness, detachment, and the acceptance of impermanence, lessons directly applicable to both daily life and the inevitability of death in battle. Shinto rituals and beliefs grounded the samurai in spiritual practice, connecting them to ancestors, the natural world, and the moral order. Philosophy was not abstract, it shaped decisions, behavior, and internal discipline. Visual arts, including painting, sculpture, and ornamental design, were both expressive and functional. Samurai often commissioned or practiced ink paintings depicting landscapes, historical scenes, or symbolic motifs. The creation and appreciation of art enhanced aesthetic sensibility, encouraged contemplation, and reinforced the values of balance, harmony, and order. Armor, weapons, and household objects were often adorned with artistic elements, blending utility with symbolic and aesthetic meaning. Artistic cultivation was thus inseparable from identity, reinforcing the integration of form, function, and ethics. Tea ceremony Chanoyu deserves special attention. Beyond mere preparation of tea, it was a ritual embodying respect, harmony, purity, and tranquility. Every movement was codified, every gesture intentional. The ceremony provided a space for reflection, social interaction, and reinforcement of moral and aesthetic values. Practicing tea ceremony cultivated patience, observation, and humility, the same qualities essential in leadership, governance, and martial practice. The samurai's engagement with tea demonstrated that mastery of ritual could mirror mastery of the sword. The role of education and mentorship in cultural life was pivotal. Samurai children learned literacy, history, and ethics alongside martial skills. Instructors emphasized both intellectual and moral development, ensuring that education fostered disciplined judgment, aesthetic appreciation, and ethical behavior. This holistic approach reinforced Bushido principles. Courage and loyalty were complemented by wisdom, cultural literacy, and moral insight. Knowledge and artistic skill became extensions of warrior identity. Performing arts, including no theater and music, were integral to social and cultural life. No, with its highly stylized movements, masks, and poetry, taught patience, presence, and attention to detail. Musical training, often in the form of string instruments or flutes, cultivated rhythm, focus, and harmony. Samurai engaged in these practices not only for personal enrichment, but as demonstrations of refinement, status, and ethical cultivation. The arts provided a bridge between personal discipline and societal engagement. Cultural activities also reinforced community cohesion and social hierarchy. Samurai participation in festivals, rituals, and public displays of art established authority, respect, and order within domains. These acts communicated values, demonstrated moral integrity, and maintained cultural continuity. Engagement in the arts was simultaneously personal development and social responsibility, reflecting the holistic integration of ethics, aesthetics, and civic duty. The philosophical exploration of mortality intertwined with artistic practice. Samurai poetry, meditation, and painting often focused on impermanence mujo, reflecting awareness of life's transience. These practices prepared individuals psychologically and ethically for the inevitability of death, whether in battle or from natural causes. The contemplation of mortality nurtured courage, composure, and ethical discernment, illustrating the seamless connection between philosophical reflection and everyday practice. Cultural exchange during the Edo period further enriched samurai life. Trade, travel, and limited contact with foreign ideas introduced new artistic techniques, instruments, and philosophical concepts. Samurai adapted, integrated, and refined these influences while maintaining traditional values. This selective integration demonstrated intellectual flexibility, discernment, and commitment to preserving core ethical and aesthetic principles amidst change. Despite the prominence of culture, martial training remained intertwined with artistic practice. Sword forms, archery, and tactics were approached with the same discipline, observation, and aesthetic sensibility applied to painting, poetry, or tea. Movements were deliberate, posture precise, and timing critical qualities mirrored in calligraphy and ritual. Artistic cultivation was thus both metaphorical and practical, reinforcing the samurai's ability to harmonize mind, body, and spirit. The Edo period also saw the codification of samurai etiquette. Social interactions, protocol, and ceremonial conduct were meticulously defined. Bowing, speech, seating arrangements, and gestures were part of training, reflecting social hierarchy, respect, and ethical awareness. Etiquette reinforced moral discipline and social cohesion, ensuring that samurai conduct aligned with philosophical and cultural ideals. Social mastery complemented martial and artistic mastery, completing the holistic education of the warrior class. In conclusion, samurai culture was a sophisticated synthesis of martial, artistic, and philosophical practices. Mastery of weapons and tactics coexisted with refinement in art, literature, and ritual. Philosophy informed ethical decisions, while aesthetic engagement cultivated mindfulness, patience, and social harmony. The samurai were not merely warriors, they were intellectual, ethical, and cultural exemplars. Their integration of combat, culture, and philosophy demonstrates a profound understanding of human potential, balancing strength with sensitivity, courage with wisdom, and action with contemplation. Appreciating this cultural dimension provides a richer, more nuanced understanding of the samurai, revealing them as disciplined, reflective, and multidimensional figures whose legacy endures beyond the battlefield. The samurai may have emerged from a world of swords, armor, and battlefields, but their influence did not end with the cessation of feudal wars. The legacy of samurai extends far beyond their historical period, permeating modern Japan and even global popular culture. Understanding this influence provides a lens through which the enduring fascination with samurai can be appreciated not merely as warriors, but as cultural icons embodying ethics, discipline, and artistry. One of the most visible aspects of samurai legacy is their philosophical and ethical influence. Bushido, the way of the warrior, codified values such as loyalty, honor, courage, and discipline. These principles have been internalized into Japanese cultural norms, business practices, and social expectations. Modern Japanese society, with its emphasis on duty, respect, and commitment to community, reflects echoes of samurai ethics. Concepts like perseverance gamen, loyalty chu, and integrity makoto, reminiscent of samurai ideals, illustrating how moral codes transcend the battlefield to shape everyday life. In literature, samurai have inspired countless novels, historical accounts, and philosophical reflections. Authors in Japan and abroad have explored their stories, ethics, and tragedies, blending historical fact with legend. Works such as Eiji Yoshikawa's Musashi romanticize the life of samurai warriors, while historical chronicles provide insights into the realities of military campaigns, political intrigue, and social structure. Literature preserves the complexity of the samurai as warriors, intellectuals, and cultural custodians, providing readers with both adventure and ethical reflection. Samurai imagery also dominates the visual arts, from traditional woodblock prints, ukiyo-e, depicting fierce battles, elegant armor, and ritualized duels, to contemporary manga and anime. The samurai's aesthetic continues to captivate audiences. Artists emphasize both the beauty of martial forms and the drama of conflict, blending historical accuracy with stylized exaggeration. Samurai armor, swords, and banners as symbols of courage, discipline, and artistry, resonating visually across generations. Film and television have further globalized the samurai's cultural impact. Kurosawa Akira's epic movies, such as Seven Samurai and Yojimbo introduced international audiences to samurai ethics, tactics, and philosophy. Hollywood films have drawn inspiration from samurai narratives, blending action, moral dilemmas, and visual storytelling. These media reinterpret samurai values: courage, honor, loyalty, and sacrifice, showing how universal themes transcend time and culture. Martial arts retain a direct link to samurai practice. Disciplines such as kendo, iaido, judo, and kudo are modern continuations of samurai training principles, while contemporary practice emphasizes sport, discipline, and personal development. The ethical and philosophical underpinnings remain. Practitioners cultivate focus, patience, and resilience, embodying aspects of Bushido in a modern context. These arts bridge the historical warrior with contemporary society, ensuring that samurai principles remain active in daily life. Education and public memory also preserve samurai heritage. Museums, historical sites, and cultural festivals celebrate their achievements, weaponry, and traditions. Visitors encounter armor, weapons, manuscripts, and ritual objects, gaining insight into both martial and cultural life. Festivals often include reenactments, martial displays, and ceremonial performances, allowing communities to engage with history dynamically. These practices reinforce national identity, ethical reflection, and cultural continuity. The samurai's influence extends to modern leadership and business culture. Principles of strategic thinking, loyalty to an organization, disciplined preparation, and ethical conduct are frequently framed in samurai terms. Executives, educators, and military leaders reference Bushido in motivational contexts, emphasizing courage, perseverance, and moral responsibility. The adaptability of samurai ethics demonstrates their applicability beyond combat, into governance, strategy, and organizational behavior. Global fascination has transformed the samurai into cultural icons. Collectors, historians, enthusiasts, and tourists are drawn to the mystique of swordsmanship, armor, and legendary duels. Cosplay, martial arts clubs, and historical reenactments celebrate the warrior's legacy, blending entertainment with education. The samurai serves as both symbol and inspiration, bridging historical fact and imaginative narrative. This global engagement highlights the universality of their values and the enduring appeal of disciplined, principled warriors. Philosophical engagement continues to inspire. Meditation, ethical reflection, and strategic thinking rooted in samurai practice inform modern life. From personal development to academic study, Bushido principles are discussed in contexts ranging from psychology to leadership studies, demonstrating the timeless relevance of the samurai ethos. They provide frameworks for decision-making, self-discipline, and moral reflection that remain meaningful centuries after the last battlefield clash. The romanticization of samurai are also evident in fiction and mythology. While some depictions exaggerate heroism or simplify ethics, they preserve a fascination with courage, loyalty, and skill. Historical accuracy and legend intermingle, creating a narrative space where the samurai embodies ideals and challenges. Stories of duels, sacrifice, and strategic brilliance continue to captivate audiences, providing both moral reflection and narrative thrill. Samurai legacy is not without its complexities. The class was hierarchical, and historical realities included violence, social inequality, and rigid obligations. Modern interpretations must balance admiration with understanding, recognizing both achievements and limitations. Yet, the ethical, cultural, and artistic dimensions remain influential, shaping how history is remembered, taught, and appreciated. In conclusion, the legacy of the samurai extends far beyond their historical period. Through philosophy, martial arts, literature, visual arts, film, education, and global popular culture, they continue to inspire and instruct. Their discipline, ethical commitment, and cultural sophistication offer lessons for modern society, emphasizing that courage, honor, and skill are valuable in every era. From Edo-era bureaucracy to contemporary leadership, samurai principles endure, reflecting the universal appeal of disciplined, ethical, and creative human endeavor. The samurai, once warriors of war, have become timeless icons of moral, cultural, and aesthetic excellence. The samurai occupy a unique space in human imagination, existing simultaneously as historical actors and mythic figures, their reality a world of armor, strategy, loyalty, and martial skill has been amplified over centuries into legends that blend ethics, heroism, and cultural symbolism. Understanding how samurai became enduring icons requires examining both the historical record and the narratives that transformed warriors into timeless archetypes. Historical samurai were complex individuals, shaped by the social, political, and military structures of feudal Japan. They were bound by Bushido, trained in martial arts, and tasked with serving their lords and domains. Yet, their lives were also human, full of moral dilemmas, political intrigue, personal ambition, and familial obligations. Chronicles, letters, and official records reveal campaigns, duels, and administrative responsibilities, showing the interplay of duty, skill, and circumstance that define their reality. These historical records provide a foundation upon which the legends would later be built. Legend began to intertwine with history as samurai stories were recorded, dramatized, and embellished. Tales of bravery, loyalty unto death, and extraordinary skill became central to Japanese literature and oral tradition. Heroes such as Miyamoto Musashi, famed for dueling hundreds of opponents and authoring the Book of Five Rings, transcended history to become emblematic of strategic genius and disciplined mastery. Such figures embody ideals, rather than purely factual accounts, illustrating how personal feats became moral and cultural symbols. The process of mythologization was influenced by societal need. As Japan transitioned from turbulent warfare to Edo-era peace, the samurai's battlefield role diminished. Stories of combat and heroism helped preserve the values of courage, loyalty, and honor even as their practical function became less central. Legends reinforced Bushido in a society no longer defined by constant warfare, offering models of ethical behavior, discipline, and personal excellence. Historical samurai became both exemplars and educational tools, bridging past and present. Drama, theater, and literature amplified the samurai myth. No and kabuki plays often depicted samurai as paragons of virtue or tragic figures caught between duty and desire. Literary works, from medieval chronicles to Edo-era fiction, explored heroism, moral choice, and the consequences of ambition. These narratives emphasized ethical dilemmas, personal sacrifice, and strategic ingenuity, embedding moral lessons within engaging stories. The line between fact and fiction blurred, creating a cultural image as compelling as historical reality. The samurai myth spread globally through translation, scholarship, and popular culture. Western fascination began in the 19th century as Japan opened to foreign observers. Samurai were described as disciplined, honor-bound warriors, blending mystique with moral philosophy. This perception fueled interest in literature, art, and eventually film, establishing samurai as universal symbols of courage, discipline, and ethical conduct. Cross-cultural interpretations amplified the myth, while preserving core ethical and aesthetic elements. Film and media played a significant role solidifying legendary status. Directors like Akira Kurosawa presented samurai not only as warriors, but as complex moral actors. Movies like Seven Samurai explored loyalty, sacrifice, and ethical decision-making in ways accessible to modern audiences. Hollywood, anime, and video games further disseminated samurai myths, emphasizing swordplay, strategy, and ethical dilemmas, while inspiring imagination worldwide. Samurai became both historical reference and archetypal figure, blending fact, fiction, and universal values. The entrance of samurai legend is also tied to symbolism and ritual. Swords, armor, banners, and emblems became markers of identity, courage, and ethical commitment. Martial arts continue these symbolic traditions, blending historical technique with modern practice. Rituals, training, and ceremonial acts preserve the ethical and psychological dimensions of samurai life, reinforcing the mythic qualities of courage, discipline, and moral clarity. Philosophical engagement enhances the myth. Bushido principles courage, honor, loyalty, and ethical responsibility remain relevant, offering guidance in leadership, personal development, and social interaction. The samurai myth conveys that mastery is not merely technical but moral, that strength is intertwined with ethical awareness, and that discipline in all areas of life fosters integrity. These enduring lessons elevate the samurai from historical warriors to timeless moral exemplars. Education and scholarship sustain the narrative. Museums, reenactments, and academic studies explore both historical accuracy and mythic interpretation. Exhibitions, artifacts, and interactive programs present samurai as both human and idealized, encouraging reflection on ethics, history, and culture. This dual approach, fact and legend, maintains relevance across generations, blending entertainment, education, and ethical contemplation. The myth also inspires imagination in global contexts. Literature, games, films, and art reinterpret samurai stories for contemporary audiences, emphasizing universality of courage, loyalty, and personal responsibility. Samurai are heroes, strategists, philosophers, and ethical guides, transcending historical specificity to offer models of character applicable to modern life. Their stories are adaptable, inspiring, and morally resonant across cultures. Yet, the myth remains grounded in human experience. Samurai legends do not erase struggle, failure, or moral ambiguity. Stories of betrayal, political intrigue, and personal hardship highlight the complexity of human choice. By integrating triumph and tragedy, myth reinforces ethical reflection and critical thinking, offering lessons about consequence, responsibility, and courage in adversity. The myth is aspirational, but deeply human. In conclusion, the samurai occupy a dual existence: historical actors and enduring myths. Their real-world achievements, ethical codes, and cultural sophistication created a foundation for legends that transcend time. Through literature, theater, film, philosophy, and global imagination, samurai continue to embody ideals of courage, discipline, honor, and reflection. Understanding both the historical reality and the mythic dimension reveals the depth, adaptability, and enduring appeal of the samurai. They are not merely relics of a violent past, they are symbols of the human capacity for mastery, ethical integrity, and cultural creativity. The enduring myth of the samurai teaches that valor and virtue are inseparable, and that the lessons of history can inspire, guide, and captivate for centuries to come.